Reality is not as solid as it looks, and the truth is a little unsettling. What you see, what you feel, what you think is happening right now is not the full story. It feels real, it looks real, but it is often just a delayed echo of what you believed yesterday, last week, or even years ago. And here is the part most people never realize. The biggest mistake is not failure, not lack of effort, not bad luck. The biggest mistake is trusting what is in front of you as final, because the moment you accept your current reality as fixed, you stop shaping what comes next. This video will break that pattern. It will show you why your present situation can be misleading, why reacting to it keeps you stuck, and how a simple mental shift can quietly change the direction of your life. There is a reason some people seem to move forward even when nothing around them improves at first, while others stay trapped even when they try harder. It is not about working more. It is not about forcing results. It is about understanding something most people ignore. There are hidden patterns behind how reality forms, and they are not talked about enough. Many studies in psychology have shown that the brain does not simply reflect the world. It filters it, it predicts it, it fills in gaps based on what it expects to see. This means that what feels like an objective experience is often shaped by internal assumptions. People who expect rejection notice it more. People who expect opportunity recognize it faster. This is not motivation talk. It is a pattern observed again and again, and it goes deeper. In certain experiments, individuals were placed in situations where their beliefs directly influenced outcomes, even when the external conditions were controlled. Their expectations changed their decisions, their reactions, and eventually their results. The world responded differently because they moved differently within it, quietly without forcing anything. There are also lesser-known cases where people held onto a belief despite seeing no immediate proof, and over time their environment began to shift in ways that matched that belief. Not instantly, not dramatically, but gradually, almost invisibly at first. The common thread was not luck, it was persistence in assumption. While others kept checking reality for validation and giving up when they did not see it, these individuals stayed focused on what they had already decided was true. This created a kind of internal stability that influenced their actions and reactions in ways they did not always notice. And those small shifts added up. But here is where tension builds. Because ignoring your current reality sounds wrong. It feels uncomfortable. It goes against everything people are taught. Society says be realistic, pay attention to facts, adjust based on what you see. And that advice works to a point, but it also keeps many people locked in cycles they cannot break. Because if reality is always leading, then change can only happen after circumstances improve. And that creates delay after delay. Waiting becomes normal, doubt becomes constant, and progress slows down. This video is not about denying reality in a reckless way. It is about understanding that what you see right now is not the final version of your life. It is a snapshot of past thinking, a reflection that has not caught up yet. And once that idea settles in, something shifts. You stop reacting so quickly. You stop letting temporary conditions define permanent beliefs. You begin to see a gap between what is and what can be. That gap is where change starts, quietly, internally, before anything on the outside moves. By the end of this video, you will understand why holding on to a new assumption, even when nothing around you supports it, can be one of the most powerful things you do. You will see why consistency in thought matters more than intensity of effort, and you will learn how to stay steady when reality seems to say the opposite of what you want. This is not about blind belief. It is about a process that has been observed, tested, and repeated in different ways across psychology, behavior studies, and real-life experiences. It may feel simple, but it is not easy, because it requires going against what feels obvious in the moment. There is also a hidden cost to not understanding this. People spend years trying to fix their outer world while their inner patterns remain unchanged. They switch strategies, try new methods, push harder, and still feel stuck. Not because they are incapable, but because they are reacting instead of leading. They are responding to reality instead of shaping it. And once that pattern becomes normal, it is hard to see another way. This is where everything begins to turn. The moment you realize that your current situation does not have the authority you gave it, the moment you understand that assumptions held consistently can outlast temporary conditions, the moment you stop checking for proof every second and start allowing time for things to align, that is when movement begins. Slow at first, then clearer, then undeniable. Stay with this until the end because each part builds on the next. Missing one piece can make the rest feel incomplete. And when it all comes together, the way you see your life right now will not feel the same. Not because the world suddenly changed, but because your understanding of it did. And that changes everything that follows. Welcome to the channel. If this kind of perspective speaks to you, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because this is just the beginning. What holds most people back is not a lack of effort. It is the way they trust what they see right now. They look at their life, their bank account, their relationships, their progress, and they treat it like a final answer. It feels logical, it feels responsible, but it quietly traps them. Because every time something does not match what they want, they react to it. They adjust their mood, they lower their expectations, they tell themselves to be realistic, and without noticing, they start aligning with what already exists instead of what they actually want. This is why frustration builds so fast. A person tries something new. They stay consistent for a few days or even weeks, and then they look around and nothing looks different. The same problems are still there, the same patterns repeat, and a simple thought begins to grow. Maybe this does not work. Maybe this is not for me. Maybe I am wasting my time. That thought feels honest. It feels grounded. But it is also the exact moment where most people stop too early. There is a pattern behind this that almost everyone goes through. At the start, there is hope. A new idea feels exciting. It creates a small shift in thinking. A person begins to act differently, even if it is subtle. But then reality shows up exactly the same as before. No visible change, no confirmation, no reward. And this is where the problem deepens. Because instead of understanding what is happening, most people take it as proof that nothing is working. They start reacting to what they see. If the result is not there, they assume the process failed. If things still look difficult, they assume nothing has improved. And slowly, they return to their old way of thinking. Not because they wanted to, but because their environment convinced them to. The truth is, people are not quitting because they are weak. They are quitting because they are reading reality the wrong way. They are treating it like a live signal, when in fact it is more like a delayed replay. What you see right now is not a fresh result. It is a reflection of thoughts and assumptions that were repeated before, sometimes for a long time. This is where the shift begins. Reality is not instant. It does not change the moment you decide something new. It takes time to reorganize. It takes time to reflect a new direction. And during that time, it will still look like the past. This is the part that confuses most people. They think nothing is changing, but in truth, the process has already started. It is just not visible yet. So when someone says, "I tried, but nothing worked," what they often mean is they tried until they checked reality and did not see a difference. When someone says, "My life still looks the same," what they are really describing is the delay between a new internal shift and an external result. And when someone says, "Maybe this does not work for me," it usually comes from measuring too early. The pattern repeats across different areas. A person starts believing they can improve their situation, but the next day still looks difficult. They try to feel more confident, but their environment still treats them the same. They decide to expect better outcomes, but small setbacks still appear. And each time this happens, the same reaction returns. Doubt replaces belief. Old thoughts take over again, and the cycle continues. This is why the core idea matters so much. Reality is a delayed reflection. What you are seeing now is not created in this moment. It is shaped by what has been repeated in the past. That means if you want a different future, reacting to the present will not create it. You cannot argue with a reflection and expect it to change. You have to change what is being reflected. And that begins internally. Most people quit too early because they expect immediate confirmation. They want proof before they continue. But proof is the result, not the starting point. The shift requires staying with a new assumption even when the current situation does not support it yet. This leads to a simple but powerful realization. You are often reacting to the past, not creating the future. The moment you let what you see control what you think, you reinforce the same pattern that created it. If things look difficult and you respond with doubt, that doubt continues the cycle. If things feel slow and you respond with frustration, that frustration keeps everything in place. The reaction becomes the cause of repetition. And without noticing, a person keeps living the same version of life again and again. Understanding this changes the way you approach everything. Instead of asking why nothing is changing, you begin to see that change does not appear instantly. Instead of using your current situation as proof, you start treating it as a temporary reflection. And instead of adjusting your thinking based on what you see, you begin to hold a direction that is not visible yet. This is not about ignoring reality completely. It is about not letting it define what comes next. It is about separating what is currently visible from what is being created. The process itself is simple when broken down. A thought is repeated enough times that it becomes an assumption. That assumption feels natural. It no longer feels like effort. It becomes a quiet expectation. And once something becomes an expectation, it starts influencing behavior in subtle ways. The way you speak changes. The way you react changes. The way you notice opportunities changes. And over time, these small shifts create different outcomes. The important part is that this happens gradually. It is not always obvious in the beginning, but it is consistent. Your mind does not argue with what you repeat. It accepts it. If a person keeps thinking that things never work out for them, that idea becomes familiar. It becomes normal. And then it begins to shape how they interpret everything. A small problem feels like confirmation. A delay feels like failure. Even neutral situations are seen in a negative way. On the other hand, if a person starts repeating a different assumption, even if it feels uncomfortable at first, the same process begins. It does not feel natural immediately, but with repetition, it becomes easier. The mind starts to accept it, and once it is accepted, it begins to influence perception and behavior in a new direction. This is why reality follows identity, not effort. Effort can change actions temporarily, but identity shapes consistency. A person can try to act confident for a short time, but if they still see themselves as insecure, their behavior will return to that pattern. But if the identity shifts, the behavior follows naturally. Acting confident before feeling it may seem strange at first, but it creates a bridge between who a person is and who they are becoming. Each time they choose that behavior, it reinforces a new assumption, and over time, that assumption becomes real to them. The same applies to expectations. Expecting failure creates a certain mindset. A person becomes cautious. They hesitate. They prepare for things to go wrong, and often that preparation leads to results that match the expectation. Not because failure was guaranteed, but because the approach was shaped by it. In contrast, expecting success changes the approach. It creates openness. It allows for persistence. It reduces the weight of small setbacks, and this difference in approach leads to different outcomes over time. What makes this difficult is not the complexity of the process. It is the patience required to stay with it. The mind wants quick results. It wants confirmation. It wants to feel certain before continuing. But this process works in the opposite way. It requires continuing before certainty appears. It requires holding a direction without immediate proof. And that is where most people struggle. They start strong, but they stop when they do not see results fast enough. The challenge is not changing thoughts once. It is repeating them long enough for them to become natural. It is staying consistent even when reality looks unchanged. It is choosing not to react every time something contradicts what you want. Each time you return to your chosen assumption, you strengthen it. Each time you avoid reacting to the old pattern, you weaken it. And slowly, without force, a new direction begins to form. There is also a quiet shift that happens during this process. At first, it feels like effort. It feels like you are trying to think differently. But over time, it becomes easier. The new assumption starts to feel normal. It no longer feels forced. And when that happens, the change becomes stable. It is no longer something you are trying to do. It becomes something you are. This is why reacting less to current reality is so important. Every reaction reinforces something. If you react with doubt, you strengthen doubt. If you react with frustration, you strengthen frustration. But if you pause and return to your chosen assumption, you strengthen that instead. It is a simple shift, but it changes the entire direction. The process is not about ignoring everything around you. It is about choosing what you give meaning to. It is about deciding what you accept as final and what you see as temporary. When you stop treating your current situation as a fixed outcome, you create space for something new to develop. And that space is where change begins to take shape. As this understanding deepens, the need for immediate proof starts to fade. You begin to trust the process more. You become less reactive. You stay more consistent. And those qualities make the biggest difference over time. Because while others keep adjusting their thinking based on what they see, you continue building something that is not visible yet. And slowly, what once felt uncertain begins to show signs of alignment. Small changes appear. Reactions from others shift. Opportunities feel closer. It does not happen all at once, but it becomes noticeable. And by the time it becomes clear, it feels natural. It feels expected, because the change already happened internally before it appeared externally. This is the part that most people never reach, not because it is impossible, but because they stop before it happens. They measure too early. They react too quickly. They return to old patterns before new ones can take hold. And in doing so, they stay in the same cycle without realizing why. Breaking that cycle begins with understanding this simple truth. What you see now is not the final result. It is a reflection of what has already been. And what you choose to assume now will shape what comes next. The process continues whether you are aware of it or not. The only difference is whether you are reacting to it or directing it. Doubt starts quietly, and then it gets louder the longer you stay in this process without visible proof. At first, it feels like a small question in the back of your mind, easy to ignore. But then it begins to repeat itself. What if nothing changes? What if this is just in your head? What if you are wasting your time? And that question feels powerful, because your current reality seems to support it. You look around and everything appears the same. The same problems are still there. The same patterns keep showing up, and your mind tries to protect you by pulling you back to what feels certain. It tells you to be careful. It tells you not to believe too much. It tells you to go back to what you already know. And this is where most people turn around. Not because they proved this process wrong, but because they felt uncomfortable staying in something that did not yet feel real. That uncomfortable feeling is important to understand. It does not mean you are doing something wrong. It means you are doing something new. When you choose a different assumption, your mind does not recognize it at first. It feels unfamiliar. It feels forced. It may even feel fake. And because it feels fake, the mind labels it as incorrect. But that is just a reaction to change. Anything new feels unnatural in the beginning. Even skills that later become effortless feel awkward at first. The same applies here. You are stepping into a different way of thinking, and your mind is adjusting. That adjustment period is where doubt appears the strongest. At the same time, your old reality does not disappear immediately. It continues to show up in the same way it always has. It brings the same situations, the same responses from people, the same results, and this creates tension. On one side, you are trying to hold a new belief. On the other side, your environment is showing you the old one, and it feels like a conflict. It feels like a contradiction, and your mind tries to resolve it by choosing what feels more solid, which is usually what you can see right now. This is what it means when it feels like reality is pulling you back. It is not something external forcing you. It is the familiarity of old patterns trying to stay in place. This is why persistence matters more than proof. If you wait for proof before you continue, you will always return to the same place. Because proof only comes after consistency. It comes after repetition. It comes after staying with something long enough for it to take shape. Most people reverse that order. They want to see something first, and then they will believe it. But this process works in the opposite direction. You believe first, you stay consistent, and then you begin to see changes. The gap between those two moments is where persistence becomes the deciding factor. There will be moments where it feels like nothing is happening, moments where you question everything, moments where you feel like going back to your old way of thinking because it feels easier. And in those moments, the choice you make matters more than any external condition. Each time you return to your assumption instead of reacting to doubt, you strengthen it. Each time you hold your direction instead of adjusting to what you see, you move closer to alignment. It is not about being perfect. It is about being consistent enough that the new pattern becomes stronger than the old one. As this continues, something begins to shift internally. The assumption you chose starts to feel less forced. It becomes easier to return to it. It does not feel like you are trying as hard. And this is a sign that it is starting to take hold. But even then, the external world may still look the same. And this is where the practical part becomes important. Because knowing the idea is not enough. You need a way to apply it in a simple and repeatable way. The first step is clarity. Decide what you actually want. Not in a vague way, but in a clear direction. Because if the direction is unclear, the mind has nothing to return to. It becomes easy to drift back into old patterns. When you decide, you create a point of focus, something that you can come back to whenever doubt appears. This decision is not about effort. It is about choosing a direction that you are willing to hold. The next step is to assume that it is already yours. This is where many people hesitate, because it feels like they are ignoring reality. It feels like they are pretending. But the purpose is not to deny what exists. It is to stop letting it define what comes next. When you assume something is already yours, you begin to align your thinking with that outcome. You start to feel it in small ways. You begin to respond differently, and those small changes begin to shape your experience. Then comes the most important part. Stop checking reality for proof. This is where most people lose their progress. They look for signs too often. They measure too quickly. They expect immediate confirmation, and when they do not see it, they doubt again. This constant checking resets the process. It pulls you back into reacting instead of creating. The shift is to allow time for things to align without needing constant validation. To stay with your assumption even when nothing visible has changed yet. At first, this may feel uncomfortable. It may feel like you are ignoring something important. But over time, it becomes easier. You begin to trust the process more. You become less reactive. You focus more on maintaining your direction than on analyzing your current situation. And that shift changes everything. Because your energy is no longer divided, it is directed. As you repeat this, your mind starts to accept the new assumption. It becomes familiar. It begins to feel normal. And when something feels normal, it no longer creates resistance. You do not have to force it. It becomes your default way of thinking. And from that place, your actions and reactions naturally begin to align with it. This is where reinforcement plays a role. Because even as things start to shift, there will still be moments where doubt tries to return. And in those moments, reminding yourself why this works keeps you steady. Reality does not change instantly, but it always follows. It follows what is repeated. It follows what is accepted as true. It follows what is held consistently over time. The delay does not mean failure. It means the process is still unfolding. Consistency becomes more important than intensity. You do not need to force strong emotions all the time. You do not need to feel perfect confidence. You just need to return to your assumption again and again, in small moments, in quiet ways. Each repetition strengthens it. Each return makes it more stable. And over time, that stability creates visible change. There is also a shift in how you respond to challenges. Instead of seeing them as proof that nothing is working, you begin to see them as temporary. You stop reacting as strongly. You stay more grounded, and that alone changes the outcome, because your response influences what happens next. When you are less reactive, you make clearer decisions. You stay more consistent, and that consistency builds momentum. The process becomes less about controlling everything and more about maintaining direction. You cannot force every outcome. You cannot control every situation, but you can control what you return to internally. You can choose what you repeat. You can decide what you accept as true. And those choices shape everything else over time. As this continues, the gap between your assumption and your reality begins to close. Slowly at first, then more clearly, small signs appear. Things begin to shift in ways that match your direction, and because you have been consistent, it feels natural. It does not feel surprising. It feels like something that was already in progress. This is why stopping is the only real way to fail. Not because the process is fragile, but because it depends on consistency. The only people who do not see results are the ones who return fully to their old patterns and stay there. Everyone else, even if they move slowly, continues to shift in some way, because each repetition moves them forward. There will still be moments where it feels uncertain, moments where progress seems slow, but those moments do not define the outcome, they are just part of the process. What defines the outcome is whether you continue or not, whether you return to your assumption or let go of it, whether you stay consistent or react to what you see. And as you keep going, something changes in how you experience all of this. It becomes less about trying to get something and more about becoming someone. Someone who thinks differently, someone who responds differently, someone who holds a direction regardless of temporary conditions. And from that place, results begin to follow in ways that feel natural. The process does not require perfection. It does not require constant confidence. It requires repetition. It requires patience. It requires a willingness to stay with something even when it does not yet feel real. And over time, that willingness turns into certainty, not because you forced it, but because you stayed with it long enough for it to become true in your experience. Each time you return to your assumption, you are building something. Even if you cannot see it yet, even if nothing looks different, the process is still moving, quietly, consistently. And as long as you continue, it continues with you. Maybe it's not about fixing your reality. Maybe it's about outgrowing it. Maybe the version of you that's trying so hard to change everything around you is not the one who creates the shift. Maybe the real change begins the moment you stop arguing with what you see and start becoming someone who no longer depends on it. Because the truth is, your life doesn't move when you fight your current situation. It moves when you rise beyond it, quietly, consistently, without needing constant proof. And that's where everything starts to feel different. The pressure drops, the doubt loses its grip, and you begin to trust something deeper than what's in front of you. There's a calm strength in that place, a kind of confidence that doesn't need validation every day. You stop chasing signs, and you start holding direction. You stop reacting, and you start choosing, and slowly, things begin to align. Not all at once, not in a dramatic way, but in small, undeniable shifts that build over time. And one day you look back and realize the reality you were once trying to fix has already changed. Not because you forced it, but because you refused to stay the same. So take this with you. You don't need to wait for everything to make sense. You don't need perfect conditions to begin. Just decide, stay with it, and let the process unfold. Because the moment you stop letting your current reality define you is the moment you start creating a new one. If this made something click for you, stay connected. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. Like this video so it reaches more people who need this shift, and share it with someone who might be stuck in that same place right now. Because sometimes, one idea at the right moment can change everything. And this is just the beginning.